Hello, and today we're going to be looking at characters in a different way. So up till now, we've been looking at them in kind of the positive way, in that we're going to put characters in, we're going to read characters in, we're going to use characters. But what happens if you get characters that you don't want, or there's an input field somewhere out there that can bring in characters that might throw your program off, as opposed to make it run smoothly. So we're going to look at two examples. One is just a fun example to kind of get you the basics, and then I'm going to show you a real world example of an app that should be coming out for me soon that uses this idea of what we're going to talk about as tokenizing and delimiting. What are those two terms? Well, that's a good question. If you've ever used Excel before and brought in a file from outside, a lot of times what they're going to ask you is, where's the file and how do I know how the data is separated? So in other words, it could be by tabs, it could be by semicolons, it could be by spaces. You know, they don't know how that is going to look. In some cases, once you tell it all that information, then it can bring that data and put it into the proper cells and columns and rows, right? We're going to kind of look at that. And so what I want you to do here is, this is a character fun file or solution file, and really it's all of two buttons and a list box. So the list box is called stuff. The first button, which is don't, I don't know why I called it don't, but I call it a don't but, and a push but. And as you might expect, all my programming is going to be on one of these two buttons, or both of these buttons, if you think about it. So the don't button, as you will see, I have first commented out. So just thinking of the idea of Excel is that you can pull things in from another file, and as you can see, there's a stream reader. I bring in an input file, and then I'm reading every line of that input file that probably has spaces in it or something that keeps it apart. So in other words, if I had, I wanted to bring 1, 2, and 3 in, I might have 1 space 2 space 3, or 1 tab 2 tab 3. And so what it would look for to strip out would be those spaces or those tabs, right, in order so that I could read 1, 2, and 3 as 3 individual numbers, not 123. That's the idea behind that. But what we're going to do is something very simple, so let's not put the cart before the horse. We're going to first create a string called 1, 2, 3, and as you can see that there are colons between that. Now, I didn't put the number there because at this point I want these to be full-on strings. I don't want you to think of these in terms of integers or reals. These are going to be just words. And then I'm going to have a character. And as you guys know, words can be broken up into characters. Or I should say strings can be broken up into characters. And sure enough, so can words. But in this case, we're going to call this the delimiter. So the separating, we're going to look for the separations of a semicolon and this \t is going to be the tab, or the term for tab, and that's why there's that slash there. If it was just a T, then it would look for the T. Likewise, there's the /n, which means return line. We could use that as well. But in this case, we're keeping it pretty simple because, to be honest, let's face it, we know what our input is. It's not actually even separated by tabs. It's separated by a semicolon. So then we create a new string, and notice that. So we start off a string, characters, and back to strings called tokens. And it is an array, as is the character. So it's going to take the string here, 1, 2, and 3, and it actually does an operation on it called split. And it splits it according to delimiters. So whenever it finds a delimiter of either semicolon or tab, then it's going to split this up. And then it's going to take, and now hopefully you're used to the for each as well, it's going to take each one of these strings, because hopefully it's going to split into 1, 2, and 3, and then split it into the stuff list box and add them each time. So let's give it a roll. So I hit don't, and sure enough, 1, 2, and 3 pop into there. So that works. And so now let's go to the push button. So what happens when I click on this guy? As you probably already saw, this is pretty simple. I start off with the word word, right? But what I'd like to do is treat the word as a set of characters. So again, the for each, where we have the temporary variable character, and we're using the word, which is this string up here. And then we're just going to pop this out into a string box. And as it turns out, the word variable has the word word put into it. So if I hit this again, let's go ahead, and I'm going to hit that. You should see W. So for the first letter in there, and this is the nice thing about the kind of the interchangeabilities of strings and characters, is that you can always convert one to the other. So we're picking apart the word into these 4 letters, and so it's just going to spit out OR and D to help finish that light thing. And then you also know that the for each statement is working, right? Because it stops as soon as it gets to the end. So nothing too fancy about that stuff, right? But I use something similar in, like I said before, an application or an app that I'm coming out with shortly. Here it is. As you can see here, I'm going to skip over some of these lines because you don't need to know what int count 1 is doing. But the character delimiters here should look pretty familiar, right? Before we were doing tabs and semicolons. As you can see here, I have a whole list of them instead of just 2. The reason why for this list, these are all of the special characters that you cannot use for a file. So I'm going to bring information in from a text box. You can't have a file name called data, text.txt. That's impossible. This app is going to look into all the files on your system. What's the point in doing that or trying to match those up? So I'm going to suck all those up. And also, this should also allow me to separate anything that's in the text box as well. So as you can see, I have contain text.simple split. Well, the contain is a text box, as it says, and then we use the split and delim just like last time. Nothing too fancy about it. The one thing that I do add to this is a trim, because even though we have all the special characters up here, sometimes you're left with some spaces. So a trim is a nice command that kind of cuts off all the end pieces of it. And I guess that could happen before the strings as well. So now we're just left with the strings that are all, ASCII characters on your keyboard, so to speak, without the special ones, right? You'll also see a couple other things. Check case means does it care whether it's case sensitive or not. If it isn't, then let's go ahead and convert everything to uppercase, so that when we compare things, then we don't have to worry about it, right? All of a sudden, we're comparing nut, NUT, small NUT, with big NUT and saying they're the same. That's all. I do it again down here because I have 2 text boxes, but that's basically it. And so that's a nice way to kind of clean and scrub out your text boxes, because not only can you have people's mistakes, but you can actually have even malicious stuff in there as well. And this will help alleviate some of it. All right, if you have any questions, please post them, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.